Hello, Trey Ratcliff here. Welcome to season 24, episode 15 of Questions for Kevin Kelly on the Camino. How are you today, Kevin?
I'm doing great. It's another wonderful, sunny, beautiful, cool day.
Oh, here, it's much faster.
As we meander along at a slow pace, being passed by more avid hikers than us.
Yeah, we're just having a cruisy day here, aren't we? It's good. And over here is my new friend, Aaron. How are you?
Hey.
We're going to talk on another show about everything that you do, all your crazy podcasts. So, before we talked about the Long Now, your project of time and underground clocks and all kinds of wonderful stuff. And then you mentioned another project that I don't know much about building libraries in the desert. And this sounds very, very cool. I have visions of, we had another talk about Burning Man. Oh, here's another set of group of people coming through.
We'll just walk a little slower.
Yeah. Check out our other talk about Burning Man and why we think it's kind of cool. And anyway, what is this library idea? And is it kind of influenced by your time at Burning Man?
My very first job as a kid, and my first job as a human that I got paid for was working as a page in the library. The page was the intern that sort of went down and retrieved old magazines and tidied books and returned books and stuff. It was sort of a grunt work in library, but I loved libraries. By the way, I should have been fired as a page because they would send me down to retrieve like a Scientific American from 1950s, and I would just never come back. It was like old stacks of magazines from years ago were like crack to me. It was just like I just couldn't. I'd open up one and you'd fall into it, and there'd be old advertisements for cement or something. It was just another world. So I was a really terrible page, but I was an avid library fan, and one of the things that we've been thinking about in recent times is the difficulty of having a library because we're moving to digital, and digital things actually in theory should last forever, but they don't, because the substrate, the substance that they're putting on keeps being obsolete. And so we've been thinking about, how do you have a library in the future? What does a library look like? What does it mean? And how can we be certain to preserve the kind of information that we want to preserve for long times, whether it's dark times or just even making it accessible to people, ordinary people, over long term. How do we do that? So we've been thinking, and I say we, the Long Now Foundation has been thinking about how we can make long-term libraries. And we have lots of different ideas, and the most radical idea for a really long-term library, like, thousands of years or more, is that you encode the information into living organisms like DNA and have them self-reproduce, because that just kind of automatically keeps going and going and going. You don't have to do very much. And the kind of science fiction scenario, there's this sort of this monastery, ancient monastery, maybe had a library in it, and people come to visit it, and there's a pond in the back, and in the pond scum is all the books of the library. They've been encoded into the DNA of the pond scum, and it's just replicating there forever. That's a kind of a library we've been thinking about, but that's not really possible. But we're trying to make right now different kinds of libraries. So we have some property at the top of a mountain in Nevada where we might build one of the clocks, but it's a very special one because it's a piece of property that's completely surrounded 360 by a national park. And it's at the top of the mountain where there's bristlecone pines. So I made a first prototype of a library that I want to last for 10,000 years, and it won't, but I want it to collect in the same area many other libraries designed by other people with their version of what they would like to have a 10,000-year library be like. And we'll accumulate many different versions of that. And some people will be very, very selective, and others want to be very inclusive, and others might be more idiosyncratic. And the purpose of these libraries will also be different, what they're trying to accomplish. But the idea is we can have multiple long-term libraries, and we'll try and gather them in one place. And that might even inspire other long-term libraries as well.
And what are there any limits on what you can put into your library? Are you picturing not just normal books, but tech and...
Right. As I said,
Yeah.
some people's idea of a library would just be about text and books, maybe the best books of the civilization, maybe the best books for how to restart civilization. That's one of the things. So we have a proto version of a library for long term that's called the Manual of Civilization. It's in the Interval, which is a bar in Fort Mason, San Francisco. And one of the aspects of this Manual of Civilization is we've collected as many books that tell you how to restart the infrastructure of civilization. Like it teaches you how to weld, teaches you how to make iron. We have a book on learning how to make paper. We've got a book on trying to teach how you weave. And so that library's purpose is to have a depository somewhere where if there was a dark age of some sort, you would have the information and you kind of could get up to speed a lot faster by having access to this kind of information. And other people might have a library where there's video in it and other that required more technological devices to access.
Records, please.
Records, music, so forth.
And can anybody go build their own library? Maybe they don't put their name on it. They give it a name, maybe in an anonymous way. Yeah. Is there going to be an approval committee as to who can do it?
In the beginning, I'm going to leave it completely open. It's like, here's the coordinates. If you have a 10,000-year library and you can manage to move it up to the top of this 12,000-foot mountain that has no facilities, it's put it there. And there'll be coordinates about where to put it. Maybe over time there'll be too many and we'll have to have that, but in the beginning, this is a crowdsourced, bottom-up, give us your library.
Right on.
And the first library there, which has been there, we just put up, is basically it's a flash drive that has the Gutenberg Project scan of books that are in the public domain.
Right.
And I forget how many books there are, but there maybe, I think there's like I don't know, I'm going to say 8,000 books or something that have the text in ASCII, very simple text files, and they're on a flash drive, and it's inside a waterproof container that you can open up very easily. It's painted yellow, and it's chained to a bristlecone pine. And that library, it gets 3 meters of snow during the winter. That library might last 50 years. I don't know. Who knows? It's not going to last 10,000 years. But next year, I'm going to put up a better one.
Okay.
All right, and that one maybe lasts a little bit longer. I have a little bit more thought into it.
And did you enclose? So you've got this cube. Is it just sitting there on top of the mountain, or did you build a little shrine around it?
No. It's actually cylindrical. Painted yellow. There's no shelter right now. It's waterproof. But it's pretty crappy. It's not very sophisticated, but it's version 1. So the idea is that you can't make the perfect library, but you can kind of iterate your way to it. And I think you need multiple versions of it, as many different people thinking about what their library of the future should be. And there are some that will, maybe there's someone who puts in a CD-ROM drive, or maybe it's someone who has a video player, or maybe they're video files. Who knows? Everybody will have a slightly different idea or prediction what they imagine people will want to have in 100 years. They'll all be wrong.
Right.
Well, any kind of prediction about 100 years is going to be wrong. But, you know, with enough wrong answers, you might get a few that are close to what will actually happen.
Right on. This is a fun project. Is this something that just pops out of Kevin Kelly brain one morning when you're having your morning tea or having?
No, you know, librarians have been thinking about this, and this is not nothing new for them. We're actually just trying to manifest some ideas that librarians have had for a real long time. The one maybe unique idea that I brought to it is I have this idea of a forever library. So let me tell you what a forever book is first.
All right.
So this is something I came up with. A forever book is a book, a physical book made of paper, that tells you how to make a paper book. So so you open up this book and there's instructions on how to make paper, how to make ink, how to make type, how to put it together, and how to print a book. And that's stage one. Stage two is a book that is actually printed using that method. So the book you see has been printed in the same way that the instructions say. And stage three is a book that has been made by a person who's only read those instructions. So it's a self-replicating book. If you get the book,
Right.
then you have instructions, and so for a self-replicating forever book to be viable, it actually has to exist as kind of a third generation. If you can make a third generation of the book that's been made using the instructions, then that has been proved that it can self-replicate over time. So you have this book that is telling you how to make another copy of itself. Now, that's for a book, but what you really want is have a self-replicating library full of media, music, video that's going to tell you actually how to make music and video in a replicating way. In other words, it will tell you how to make a phonograph. It will tell you how to make a CD player. And in theory, you should be able to have enough information from that to actually make a CD player that can play the CD of itself. And so if you can do that with a library with multimedia that has enough explicit information to tell you how to create the library that has all this information that can replicate itself, that's the forever library.
Fantastic. I want to build a library. Do you, Aaron?
I would love to build a library. I was the whole time Kevin's been talking, I've been thinking about all the ways that my conception of a library differs from his, and I realized that's probably the intention of all this, to make us think about how we would design a library.
Right.
So yes, I definitely want
So
to.
tell me about the kind of a long-term library, a 10,000-year library that you would make. What would you imagine being inside of it, and what would it look like?
I think I would focus less on like building things like a CD player or sort of the how-to elements, and I think for me the 1,000-year library, because it's inherently a subjective thing. Like when you say the great books or the best books, I feel like we just like call to mind the entire history of humanity right there, and we say like, well, how do we know what the best books are?
Sure.
I think I would design my library to be my tomb a little bit. It would be a picture of me and what I thought was important, I guess, which is what Kevin's is like too. Like we're in some ways memorializing ourselves and our civilization here.
Yeah.
And I think I would push towards the idiosyncratic rather than the universal. I would say this was Aaron Lammer. He loved Van Morrison's Astral Weeks.
Right.
That's why it is included here.
So you just make a list of things that you liked?
I think I would include them as whatever. I agree with the idea of as permanent as possible media. Mine would be more of like a mixtape of my media and less of an encyclopedic.
So you'd actually be on tape. You'd actually have it like on a cassette tape?
I unfortunately have not thought about this before, but yeah, I think I would pick whatever There's something about the USB thumb drive right now where it feels like if there's one thing that might still turn on in the future, it feels to me like USB.
Yeah.
So for some reason, I think I'd go USB, which is probably the silliest idea possible.
No, that's what mine is.
Okay, yours is USB also.
A USB flash drive, right?
Yeah.
So I don't think that's silly at all. I think that's. I mean, I think it's like, even if it's not like common use, there would probably be enough people who could access it, in a retro way.
Yeah.
The vintage folks. But there's probably somewhere a USB drive reader that would exist.
Right. And then I think I would also maybe try to abstract even further on the music and say, here's on a USB drive, you probably can't use this. We use the 12-tone musical notation. Here's the hertz rate for each of the notes. Here are the notes in this song. You can get a pretty good idea if you can figure that out.
Right.
Here's a melody. Here's a melody I liked.
I was thinking the same thing when you brought it up a few days ago, like what kind of library would I build? And I also came to this somewhat grim conclusion of a mausoleum.
Yes.
That it would be, I was thinking that it would be kind of like a cabin, like Jacob's cabin from Lost, but a cozy kind of visceral, real cabin, because we're obviously going into a super techno future.
Right.
That's where we might lose touch with these kinds of things.
Right.
And so, just like you love the real written book, like the feel of leather and that kind of stuff, I would probably try to recreate that. Do you want some ice cream?
Yeah, I certainly do.
All right. Pause. We'll come right back after this much needed chocolate ice cream.
Yes.
I can assume.
I love this.
Yeah, look at this.
Rural. This would appear to be an illusion to me if I counted it most places.
It is.